Hello and welcome back to the GCP-Mindset channel. Today we'll answer the question, how is informed consent tailored for vulnerable populations?
Now, let's first define what a vulnerable population is. In clinical trials, we refer to vulnerable populations as it relates to people who are specifically endangered through participation in clinical trials. A few examples of that are minors, simply because the informed consent part of the process is not as easy to perform. We have pregnant women because we care for two lives, not only that of the person, but also of the child. And then we have some people who have different rights, for example, people that are incarcerated. Now, these populations are generally excluded from clinical trials because we don't want to generate data from vulnerable populations if we can also do it in populations which are not as vulnerable. And sometimes, though, it is really important to collect this data directly. And then you need to think about the informed consent process. Now, for example, for pregnant people, it is not required to have a specific informed consent. However, you need to make sure that you tailor this information to the fact that there could be danger to the child as well. And this needs to be directly addressed. It is different, though, if you're talking about minors. So in that range, it needs to be considered how much of the information in the informed consent process is dependent on language and understanding of the information we try to transfer. Generally, informed consent documents and the entire process should be tailored to a language which is easily accessible, not very scientific, easy to grasp. However, this needs to be even rethought further when you're talking about kids of the age of 14, 12, 8, 5, 3. How do you inform them in an adequate manner of what participation in a clinical trial means and really relay their options and the danger that is also associated with it? So here we need specific informed consent documents, ways of presenting the information, which is tailored to the language and not one for all kids, but based on age groups. Infants, of course, who do not have the language capacities do not need to be informed. But other than that, kids should be informed as well, or must be informed as well. Now, in addition to children, also their primary caregivers, usually their parents, need to be informed. So when you enroll, for example, a 14-year-old teen into the study, the teenager will get an informed consent and his or her parents will too. So overall, you have then 2 informed consent forms and then enroll the patients after this discussion around the risks and benefit of the study. So really for vulnerable population, but specifically for kids, there is a dedicated consideration that you need to move through to get an adequate informed consent process situated for these vulnerable populations.